Save Your Mind by Dr. Antoine Hakim, abridged, read by Vincent Bagnall. We are all getting older, we're living longer, and we're terrified of losing our minds and having dementia. This book is written because I believe I have advice that will substantially reduce your likelihood of having dementia. The main lesson my 40 years of neurology practice have taught me is that vascular disease affecting the brain, combined with harmful behavioral patterns, contributed to dementia in the majority of cases. Now, this combination usually led to sufficient damage to the brain's structure and integrity that normal thinking and memory, recall, became difficult, if not impossible. This book is not intended only for the older citizen. It is now clear that the script for dementia is written very early, perhaps as early as our teenage years. So this book is written for everyone who cares about keeping the mind healthy. In my neurology practice, I have seen patients in their 40s who complained of brain fog and were clearly staring at the abyss of dementia. Some were able to reverse course and avoid that outcome, while others continued their downhill path and over a few years became heavily dependent on their environment. In the following pages, I will share with you knowledge I have gained from research done in Canada, the United States, and internationally on the topic of strokes and other vascular diseases that affect the brain. I'll advise you especially on how to avoid them, and I'll also share with you knowledge on how to acquire some patterns of behavior and avoid others in order to preserve your cognitive abilities. We do not have to acquire dementia as we age. There are lots of good examples of individuals and even entire societies where people remain intellectually sharp into very old age. I will give several examples of healthy minds in old age and extract from the accumulated studies advice you need to follow to stay sharp. And to accomplish this, I have summarized current knowledge into 7 rules to guide your future mental and cognitive health. These 7 rules are based on my clinical experience, published research work, and voracious reading on the medical literature. The rules will benefit every person interested in preserving their mind and their ability to think and remember. So enjoy and get with the program. Before the rules, a few facts. Dementia is by and large a disease that accompanies old age, and all of us are hoping, indeed expecting, that we will live longer than our parents did. Statistics confirm this expectation of longevity. They tell us that currently 50 million Americans are older than 65, and that in Canada, 16% of the population is in that category. This demographic group is growing faster than any other. Not only that, but the rate of growth of this group is accelerating. Once Americans reach the age of 65, the average remaining life expectancy is still 20.4 years for women and 17.8 years for men. It's not just that we are living longer. Our attitude towards old age is changing. I saw an obituary recently that said Joe Smith died unexpectedly at the age of 93. While we are, of course, delighted that life's joys may be ours for longer than we anticipated, our fervent desire is not just to live long in years. We also want good life quality. And for most of us, that means keeping our marbles and our independence as we age. We are aware deep in our souls that without the heaven of our brain and our mind, there is no health. The statistics about life quality are daunting. Currently, it is estimated, using different calculation methods, that more than 500,000 Canadians, 5 million U.S. citizens, and 44 million individuals worldwide suffer from dementia. If you include individuals affected by milder forms of memory difficulty, not severe enough to qualify for dementia, these figures grow by about 50%, as if that was not bad enough. It is also estimated that every 5 minutes, one person somewhere is diagnosed with dementia. And of course, those individuals affected with dementia are not the only ones affected by the condition. Every person with dementia requires a caregiver, frequently a family member whose chances of becoming depressed increase dramatically over time. And usually both the affected individual and the care provider need to quit work, stop deriving income, and stop paying taxes. And for this reason, there is increasing concern that what some refer to as the dementia time bomb will result in a severe fiscal squeeze. Spending on age-related programs, including health care for seniors, will have to increase at a time when declining birth rates will result in diminishing revenues. And this will force governments to increase taxes and modify health care systems to give priority to this debilitating condition, taking funding away from other projects and health care needs. David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, called dementia one of the greatest enemies of humanity. Against this unsettling background, there is good news, and that is why this book was written. In addition to individual stories, the conclusion that we can reduce our chances of having dementia is supported by several large and informative studies. The parents of a colleague live on the island of Corsica, where the terrain rises sharply from the sea. My colleague's aging mother has to climb several flights of stairs to get to her house and descend them if she needs to do any shopping. Recently, it was suggested that she move households to a lower dwelling so she wouldn't have to climb up and down so many stairs. She responded with wonderful insight and said, "Going up and down all these stairs is what is keeping my body alive and my mind sharp." In addition to individual stories, the conclusion that we can reduce our chances of having dementia is supported by several large and informative studies. The Scottish Lothian study tested 70,000 children at age 11 and followed them over the years. The Lothian study showed clear evidence, perhaps not surprisingly, that the more intelligent a child was at 11, the more likely it was for his or her cognitive abilities, such as memory, to be preserved in old age. Genetics, who you picked for mom and dad, does play an important role, but that studies also clearly showed that the participants' scores on IQ tests at the age of 11 predicted their score in old age less than 50% of the time. Most of how well a participant functioned in old age depended on what he or she did with the brain qualities that were provided at birth. So your mental function in old age is not written in stone. It is written in brain power. You can boost or waste, confirming the important concept of brain plasticity, meaning that your brain is malleable and modifiable. In confirmation of that statement, the study suggests that regardless of how smart the young Scots were at birth, those who remained physically fit maintained their bilingual backgrounds by nurturing their knowledge of both Gaelic and English, acquired more education, and did not smoke, had better test scores in old age than would have been expected. In other words, the years will take a different toll on the brain depending on what you did with what you were given. The richness of the information each of the 100 billion neurons in our brain receives and sends out is to some extent predetermined. It's inherited through genetics, which determine the number and quality of the neurons, other brain cells, and their connections, as well as the chemical environment they live in. So, some of our cognitive and thinking abilities are not under our control, but the more important cues provided to the neurons in our brains are those acquired through our own activities and emotional environment. The trillions of contact points among the cells in the brain are known as synapses. At 5 months of gestation, the fetus has all the cells in the brain that he or she will have as an adult. The growth in the volume of the brain from then on is entirely due to the growth of the connections the neurons make on the receiving and outgoing ends. Keeping all these connections active and healthy is what provides us with the ability to think rapidly, calculate, recognize a familiar face, and remember an event, a date, or a place. It is important to keep in mind something that has been known for a long time, that everything we do or don't do affects the health of these cells and their connections. Their numbers and functions change with time, but more importantly, respond to the health of our bodies and to all our activities, be they physical, social, intellectual, emotional, or dietary. Cells communicate through electrical impulses, which require chemical reactions to occur within and around the cells. And all this activity needs a lot of energy supplied rapidly. And this is what makes the brain so dependent on its blood supply. It is estimated that the adult brain contains 600 km of blood vessels, and that is more blood supply per unit weight than any other body organ. The brain does not store energy, so it needs to receive a constant supply of it. Whether you are awake or sleeping, daydreaming or calculating, lying down or jogging, a variable but appropriate amount of energy is passed to the brain from the blood. If the blood supply to any brain region falls below the needed level, a blackout will occur, and in time, this will translate into difficulties with thinking, memory, and other cognitive functions. In order for us to rapidly access information, evolution has assigned jobs to different brain parts. It is estimated that each brain region that is assigned a specific job receives and integrates information from 55 other brain regions before it sends out an action signal down the axon. Cognition, thinking, and memory are such important functions that many parts of the brain are involved in serving these functions. Still, in the same way that specific parts of the brain are dedicated to moving our arm or leg, providing us with the ability to see and helping us keep our balance, certain parts of the brain carry the major burden of helping us remember, develop good judgment, and behave in appropriate ways. These complex activities require and access a number of structures, but in order to make sense of the roles these structures play, let us review the different kinds of memories and other cognitive functions our brains perform. It is truly amazing to think of the vast array of facts that we carry in our heads. You not only remember facts about yourself, date of birth, age, names, and histories of family members, and about the world around you. You know that Paris is the capital of France, but you also remember how to get from home to work, where your favorite coffee shop is, how to get to it, and how to ride a bicycle. Scientists have given names to these different memory pools. Declarative or explicit memories refer to your ability to state a fact from memory, either an episodic memory, I hosted 4 people for supper last Thursday, or a semantic memory, John A. Macdonald was Canada's first Prime Minister. Non-declarative memories, things that we remember how to do automatically and without conscious thought, refer to skills or abilities we remember and can undertake any time, such as reading, writing, and singing. Yes, it takes memory to speak correctly and sing in tune. The reason scientists have made these distinctions is that the brain deals differently with information we are sending it, depending on whether we are learning a skill or learning a fact, and how important it is. One very important part of our memory storage system is embedded deep in our brain and is called the limbic system. It includes a number of structures that are vital for our memory functions. Parts of this limbic system are super specialized. Recording and registering information have been assigned to a limbic system region of the brain called the hippocampus. This is the brain region that receives an explicit fact as soon as it is formed, and depending on how important it is for you to retain the fact and for how long, may convert the information from short-term to long-term memory. If the memory is needed for only a short while, the hippocampus will store it for you. As time passes, the hippocampus has to decide based on input from you if this memory is worth storing. If it is important, the hippocampus ships the memory out to other brain regions responsible for storing information so that it can dedicate itself to storing additional new or recent memory. We know this because interrupting the activity of the hippocampus impairs recent but not remote memory. When I did my neurology residency and later was on staff at the Montreal Neurological Institute, I had many opportunities to interact with Dr. Brenda Milner and listen to her lectures. Dr. Milner is still an active and productive neuropsychologist at the age of 96, and she recently received the Kavli Prize for the discovery of specialized brain networks for memory and cognition. She wrote a great deal on one patient, referred to as HM, who underwent extensive brain surgery to cure his intractable epilepsy. The surgery included removal of major parts of the hippocampus on both sides. While HM was able to learn new tasks that Dr. Milner taught him, he had some procedural memory preserved, he could not remember interacting with her at all. It was as if every visit by her was the first one. Nature also provided an unfortunate experiment that confirmed more recently what we learned from HM about the role of the hippocampus in memory function. In late 1987, 150 individuals were poisoned when they consumed mussels contaminated with a naturally occurring toxin called domoic acid. 4 of these individuals died. 1/3 of the people who consumed these toxic mussels suffered neurologic abnormalities, and 14 of the most severely affected individuals were examined extensively. All had become confused and disoriented within 48 hours of eating the mussels, and it took some of them up to 12 weeks to recover, only to realize that they had developed serious memory problems. Their other cognitive functions, such as IQ, language ability, and emotional control, were mostly intact, but they all suffered from amnesia. Now, if you gave them a sentence and asked them to repeat it immediately, they were able to do so. But if you let some time go by and asked them again, it was impossible for them to come up with it. They had what we call anterograde amnesia, the same variety that HM suffered. The most severely affected individuals had also retrograde amnesia. They could not dredge up from memory important past events in their lives. Now, where was the trouble? It was in the hippocampus and its neighbor, the amygdala, on both the right and left sides of the brain. And although these structures appeared normal on MRI scans, they were not consuming anywhere near normal amounts of energy when studied by other methods, such as positron emission tomography or PET, implying that brain cells within these structures had been poisoned to death. And this unfortunate experiment by nature confirmed the important role a healthy hippocampus plays in serving our memory functions. It also raised the level of oversight on mussels, so they remain one of my special culinary pleasures. A part of the brain, called the prefrontal cortex, is often referred to by neuroscientists as the CEO of the brain, because that is the region we use to make rapid decisions that determine how we behave. The frontal lobe allocates our attention to what is most relevant at that moment. If memory is affected, the decisions may become delayed, unreliable, or unconventional. So it is important to recognize that not only is the limbic system involved in memory functions, it is also integrated into brain systems that mediate behavior and emotional output, and may even be connected to systems that control our physical functions, like blood pressure and heart rate. Information is transferred across the brain very rapidly. In the example of running into a person and recognizing their familiarity, the whole business might take less than milliseconds to complete. You might think that sending information through the thousands of connections each cell has would be slow and tedious, and you would be right, except for the fact that the brain has developed a rapid transit system. The message gets there rapidly because it hops across myelinated axons rapidly. An axon is a long, thready part of a nerve cell that sends out an electrical signal or message prompting an action. The message goes to its target cells, but because it has to get there rapidly, the axons are covered with fatty substance called myelin that is ideally organized for rapid transmission. Instead of the message having to crawl through the axon itself, myelin allows the electrical message to jump across major segments of the axon to get to the target at lightning speed. Additionally, the brain has evolved so that the neurons are mostly lined up in the undulating outer layer of the brain called cortex, or gray matter, and all the myelinated axons are in the deeper white matter, which gets its name from the fact that myelin is lighter in color. The myelinated axons are the telephone lines. Transmission through the axons occurs extremely rapidly, so long as these myelinated axons remain healthy. And they serve not only our memory function, but also other elements that combine to form what we generally refer to as personality, intact judgment, appropriate emotional control, an appreciation of self, imagination, foresight, and many more characteristics and functions. So while memory is at the center of our cognitive functions, collectively these functions harness the energies of major parts of our brain. When memory is impaired, our personalities also change. So get ready. You now know enough about the brain to start tackling and hopefully following the rules that will allow you to protect your brain against dementia. Rule 1. Grow your brain's capacity for cognitive functions. Have you saved for a rainy day? You probably have because you thought someday you would need money to deal with an emergency. We all would like to feel financially secure in our old age too, so I suspect you would agree that a reserve fund for our retirement would be very useful. We would call on it when we need it to spend for a function or a project. It's essentially the same simple principle that governs our brain's cognitive ability. You build a reserve of ability to think and remember so you can face future negative influences on your mind. In this regard, a very important study that has taught us a lot has been the nun study. Essentially, 678 nuns of Notre Dame congregation in the United States allowed scientists to test their ability to think, to evaluate their judgment, and to measure their memory functions. And they also allowed the scientists to look into their early educational and family backgrounds, their early writing styles, and the richness of their written compositions. They even permitted the examination of their brains after death. With this information, scientists went to work to answer the questions, why is it that there is this disconnect between the ability of some individuals to continue functioning normally in life with normal mental and cognitive functions, even when their brains are invaded by Alzheimer's disease? How can you continue to think normally in the face of a deteriorating brain that has the hallmarks of this disease we all associate with dementia? This was the genesis of the concept of cognitive reserve that constitutes rule number 1. You save when you are young. You build mental capacity in your early years and continue to replenish it throughout your life so you can face the damaging conditions that are bound to come your way as you get older, including the accumulation of the nasty proteins of Alzheimer's disease, and overcome their negative impact on your thinking and memory functions. So, let us define cognitive ability. The word cognitive refers to all the activities our mind performs and the characteristics of our thinking abilities. Cognition includes our ability to perform the following mental activities. Remember facts, people, and places, pay selective attention to an event or a task, concentrate on the activity we're involved with, form good judgments, make reasonable decisions, be oriented in time and place, be able to connect memories sequentially, remember what an object we saw looks like when we're not looking at it, use language fluently, both when we speak it and when we process what we hear, and calculate accurately. How much brain power we have in reserve with which to counter brain wear and tear over the years and still function well is known as cognitive reserve. It's defined as your ability to do more with your brain than one would predict from objectively assessing, say, by looking at the scan of your brain, the wear and tear your brain has sustained over the years. And there are multiple actions and measures you must take to build up your cognitive reserve. 3 important points are made by experts in cognitive reserve. The first is that the brain likes variety. Exercising one part of your brain again and again does not necessarily result in activation of other parts and improvement of their functions. The brain is extremely efficient in the functions it activates in response to mental exercises, for instance, so we must vary the input. Think of it this way. If someone is a good hockey player, it doesn't necessarily make them a good tennis player. However, the strong muscles developed playing hockey will be useful while practicing tennis. Doing one thing repeatedly for a long time is not as useful to your brain or effective for your mental functions as doing many things for shorter periods of time. So do not spend all your time doing one thing again and again. The second important point is that the brain likes and needs to be pushed. What you demand of it must overcome its natural desire to preserve energy and take it easy. Plasticity of the brain, meaning its ability to develop new skills and improve thinking and memory functions, serves you best when you push it. As an older adult, you have all of life's experiences to work for you, and they have promoted your brain's plasticity. So while you can take full advantage of that, you cannot stop making new demands on the brain. The third important point is that some forgetting is normal. In addition to fixed memories, there are items you remembered for a while but voluntarily forgot. For a long time, you could remember the details of that horrible car accident you saw happening in front of you 12 years ago, but the details are now blurred. And this is an important point to stress. Forgetting information that is not important, that doesn't have survival value or emotional impact for you, is a normal process. Your brain prioritizes not only what needs to be stored as memory, but also what can be safely discarded because it's not essential. After a hectic morning, don't be upset if you don't remember at the end of the day where your car is in the parking lot. A lot of people appear convinced that brain games will ward off the threat of dementia. Unfortunately, the evidence for this is not very strong. Nowhere near as strong as it is for the benefit to our minds of physical activity. A recent article in Neurology described a study involving more than 600 men and women, average age 70, that compared the relative impact of physical exercise and mental activities on the brain structure. The participants' MRI brain scans were examined over a 3-year period. The research showed that social and intellectual activities did not appear to provide as much benefit to the structural health of the participants' brains as did regular physical exercise. The group that kept moving and stayed physically active experienced less brain shrinkage and less damage to the brain's wiring than the group that sat a lot but did a lot of thinking exercises. Interestingly, if the activity was complex and demanded multiple tasks, such as playing a video game for 30 minutes a daily, the participants grew more gray matter in the brain areas associated with spatial navigation, strategic planning, working memory, and motor performance. However, the next year, the same journal published the results of a study involving a different group of 294 people. As in the Nun study, these individuals were given an annual test measuring memory and thinking, and their brains were studied after death. The conclusion of this study was that those who had a record of keeping their brains busy had slowed their cognitive decline compared to those who let their brains idle. So it appears that the more varied and demanding the activities you challenge your brain with are, the better your intellectual and cognitive abilities will be. A crucial requirement for maintaining cognitive abilities in top shape seems to be physical activity and avoiding a sedentary lifestyle. Here are some suggestions to grow your brain's cognitive reserve and protect your thinking and memory. Number 1, playing brain games is not a waste of time, but the benefit is limited. Number 2, keep varying how you activate your brain. Demand multiple kinds of brain activities, especially ones that require eye-hand coordination, such as playing tennis or playing some video games, or eye-ear-body coordination, such as dancing to music. Number 3, continue to read and to write, do calculations, complete crossword puzzles, put together multi-piece picture puzzles, commit telephone numbers and other information to memory. In short, keep that brain working by performing many tasks, and do so repeatedly. Number 4, do not allow your brain to tune out by watching a lot of TV. Watching TV is usually a passive activity that does not stimulate the brain. Number 5, remain socially engaged. Make sure you have good friends who care about you and vice versa, and connect with them frequently. 6, keep physically active. Go for walks if you can, and if you enjoy swimming, it is a great way to stay cool while working out. 7, do not get discouraged and give up if you have an occasional memory lapse. Keep at it. Rule number 2, reduce the debit calls on your mind. In patients with dementia who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, 79.9% showed abnormalities of the blood vessels in their brains and outside of it. They suffered from vascular disease. These findings show that a disease of blood vessels feeding the brain contributes to 75 to 80% of the dementias. The crucial implication of these studies is that prevention of vascular disease, particularly in early and middle life, represents the best chance we have to decrease our risk of dementia and delaying its onset. So let's look at what constitutes vascular disease and how we can prevent vascular disease of the brain. Many studies confirm that strokes are a major cause of impaired cognitive functions, including dementia. In one study, 57% of patients who suffered a stroke while they were free of any dementia developed some degree of cognitive trouble within the first year after the stroke. An additional 32.4% developed the lesser condition of MCI. Thus, a stroke will diminish to a lesser or greater extent the ability to think, remember, and make judgments in 90% of those unfortunate individuals who suffer this event and do not receive timely treatment. There is a very important new category of brain-damaging events that can lead to dementia. It turns out that not all blockages of blood vessels in the brain result in symptoms that the individual feels. It is possible that a blood vessel that becomes blocked is so small that the individual does not feel anything is wrong at the time, or may feel a temporary deficit from which he or she recovers rapidly. We began to see these brain scars on CT scans and MRI scans in patients who suffered from high blood pressure or other vascular risk factors. Let's look at education for a moment. Low education may explain 19.1% of dementia worldwide, but only 7.3% in North America. And this is likely because early school education is more prevalent in North America than in poorer countries. And the brain is forced during the process of learning to create and sustain the internal connections among its various cells early in life. That constitutes building up of cognitive reserve. And later on in life, these early connections protect the brain from the influences that diminish or disrupt the thinking process. When we explain the influence of education on the health of our minds, additional evidence comes to us from individuals who speak more than one language. If you've struggled to learn more than one language, your possibility of dementia is delayed. When compared with those who speak only one language, those who commonly use two languages had a 7-fold increase in protection against cognitive impairment. The benefit of bilingualism to the brains and minds of individuals was again reviewed and confirmed recently. There's one catch, however, to this benefit, and that is that you have to keep using both languages if you want to continue deriving the cognitive benefit. The brain is the ultimate capitalist. If you don't use it, the brain won't waste energy maintaining the connections, and they will be lost. Remember, use it or lose it. This study implies that our brains need to be stimulated intellectually, preferably at an early age, but definitely at every period of life, and the stimuli need to be varied if we are to remain cognitively sharp. The important point is this: we have the tools we need to shield our brains against dementia. You can keep your marbles if you make that an important goal for yourself, starting as early as possible while remembering that it is never too late. Many of the actions and lifestyles I recommend to improve memory lead to the mobilization of stem cells so that the hippocampus is constantly refreshed. New memories can be easily formed, and old ones can be easily recalled. Individuals who are physically active have larger hippocampi on brain scans and have far better preserved memory functions than those who are sedentary, because physical activity is one very important mechanism to mobilize stem cells that serve memory functions. This even works after damage to the brain has occurred through vascular disease and cognitive abilities reduced. Mr. T asked me what recovery he could hope for, and he was motivated. He knew that his career and his family's well-being depended on his recovery. He made a complete turnaround in his lifestyle and doggedly pursued a better diet for himself and his family, resulting in weight loss and a reduction of his hypertension. He attended a program where practical memory improving strategies were taught. He was also motivated to learn ways of reducing his stress through exercise. After 6 months, he could not give up exercising because it had improved his mood, his cognitive ability, his efficiency and productivity at work, and he had learned the value of socializing away from his TV. He was an individual confirmation of the results of a study led by my colleague Dr. Brad McIntosh, who showed that regular exercise improved the ability of brain centers important for memory and thinking efficiency to talk to each other. Rule number 3, monitor and tame your blood pressure. Our blood pressure generally increases with age. As we get older, our blood vessels become a little stiffer. And so for the same volume of blood, the increased arterial stiffness will cause the pressure against the walls of the blood vessels to go higher. So any condition that will A, thicken the walls and increase the stiffness of the blood vessels, B, increase the volume of their contents, or C, squeeze the blood vessels from outside, will increase blood pressure, leading to the grave consequences we've outlined. Specifically then, in addition to getting older or having inherited a predisposition to high blood pressure, the brain potentially modifiable conditions that will lead to hypertension are these. Number 1, excess salt in our diet. It's a major driver of high blood pressure. We know what excess salt does to us. It tightens the blood vessels and increases the resistance to the flow of blood, resulting in hypertension. Number 2, the sugar that we consume when we drink too many beverages, eat too much cereal or too many cakes, biscuits, or muffins increases our blood pressure because it interacts with the lining of our blood vessels and makes them tighten up. Number 3, obesity is a growing problem in Western societies and a major driver of dementia. Think of the excess fat as not only squeezing the major blood vessels in the body and raising blood pressure, but also a factory producing nasty chemicals. Number 4, smoking does contribute to hypertension. So think of cigarettes this way. With every puff of smoke you take, your blood turns a little less red and a little more blue, depriving your brain of the energy it needs to function properly. With every puff inhaled, the smoker introduces more toxins into the body and makes the lining of the blood vessels feeding the brain more inflamed and angry. Number 5, excessive and persistent alcohol intake can lead to dementia. The medical literature suggests that excessive drinking can be defined as anything more than 2 glasses of wine per day, or their equivalent, which is somewhere around 300 milliliters of wine per day. There are, in fact, suggestions that low levels of alcohol intake protect the brain against dementia, but this has not been conclusively proven. Number 6, a sedentary lifestyle may be increasingly imposed on us by modern life's demands and the wired world. We sit a lot, and as we will see, a sedentary lifestyle is associated with raised blood pressure and results in weaker memory and cognitive functions. Number 7, insufficient or poor quality sleep will contribute to hypertension. Sleeping long enough to feel rested is not a luxury. It is the opportunity for the brain to rejuvenate itself and for our blood vessels to relax. Number 8, we have known for a while that persistent loneliness, high anxiety, and depression have major negative impacts on our blood vessels and lead to raised blood pressure. Number 9, there's growing evidence that persistent exposure to air pollution will weaken cognitive functions. Number 10, noise, if not pleasant to our ears, raises our blood pressure and impairs our memory functions. I recommend that my patients buy a BP measuring device to use at home. It's the best investment you will ever make for good health. Make sure you understand how to use it by asking the salesperson where you bought it, or a nurse, or a physician. Every week on the day of the week you are least likely to be stressed, sit down in a quiet spot, put the blood pressure cuff on, relax your legs and body for a minute or so, then take the pressure measurement. Write the top and bottom values down against the date of the measurement on a continuous record you keep. When you visit your doctor, take the record of these resting BP values with you to discuss them with her or him. How to lower your blood pressure. Number 1, lose weight if you carry excess pounds. The closer you are to normal weight, the more normal your blood pressure will be. 2, modify your diet to reduce calories and sodium and increase consumption of fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy products. Number 3, limit your alcohol intake to 2 drinks or less per day. Number 4, become more physically active. Number 5, develop good sleep hygiene. Number 6, increase social interaction and reduce stress. And number 7, if you're a smoker, quit. Rule 4. Eat right, weigh light, and stay bright. Food is essential for life, but only in moderation. Too much of it will have grave consequences on your physical and mental health. Even the ancients recognized that overeating can be harmful. There was a saying among them that we should start eating only when we are hungry, and we should stop eating before we are full. In our modern Western society, not only is there emphasis on eating a lot, but the food we eat often packs many calories. There are other good suggestions for diet that are now proven to be healthy. The DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, was developed by the National Institutes of Health in the United States with the aim of lowering blood pressure without medication. The diet has the added benefit of reducing cholesterol in the blood. It's rich in fruits, vegetables, and low-fat or non-fat dairy, emphasizes a reduction in refined grains in favor of whole grains, and promotes lean meats, fish, and poultry. Most importantly, the diet limits the amount of salt consumed. Following the DASH diet results in improvement in executive function, memory, and learning, as well as speed of thinking. When combined with a weight management program and aerobic exercise, the DASH diet improves cognitive function in those who suffer from high blood pressure. The Mediterranean diet has also had recent scientific confirmation of its ability to decrease the likelihood of dementia. Now, perhaps related to this is the proven benefit of the Mediterranean diet in reducing the likelihood of diabetes by as much as 40%. Those who adhere to this diet can also expect to live longer, and even when people who follow this diet pay no attention to calories, they still have a lower incidence of obesity and diabetes. On the other end of the spectrum, individuals with normal cognition who did not adhere to the Mediterranean diet show a thinner ribbon of gray matter in their brains, perhaps foreshadowing trouble to come. The essential features of the Mediterranean diet are as follows: an abundance of fruits, vegetables, and nuts, whole grain cereals and whole grain breads, extra virgin olive oil is the primary source of fat, low intake of saturated fat and no trans fats, low amounts of dairy products, fish, poultry, and eggs a few times a week, red meat only a few times a month, and a moderate amount of wine with meals. The steps to successful weight loss. Number 1. The weight loss program is started only when you have absolute and deep determination to protect your health and future cognitive functions. Start when you're determined to succeed. Number 2, make sure you have social support while pursuing the difficult goal of shedding pounds. A study has shown that in-person support and even support delivered remotely without face-to-face contact has resulted in obese patients achieving and sustaining significantly more weight loss. Number 3, when you are good and ready, do not set unrealistic goals. Your challenge is to modify your behavior more than count calories. Do not start by defining the weight loss goal or target weight, as these mental set points are a recipe for disappointment and lead people to give up on their weight loss program. Number 4, do not skip meals. Eat breakfast, ideally fruits. During the day, consume healthy snacks. Number 5, resolve to substitute nutritious food for unhealthy varieties. I stated that the brains of obese individuals have a preference for fatty foods, but the brain can be retrained to prefer healthy foods. Number 6, when you eat chicken or fish, take the skin off. And remember that meat that is marbled means you will consume extra fat. Strip as much fat off your smaller piece of meat as you can before you cook it. Number 7, make sure your daily intake of fruit includes at least 5 different fruits. Number 8, snack carefully. If you find some foods impossible to resist snacking on, like ice cream or cake, resolve not to buy them so you're not tempted by them. Number 9, another excellent snack is a few nuts of your choice. Make sure they're unsalted and ideally in the shell. Number 10, avoid all-you-can-eat buffets. It is well proven that under these circumstances, the glutton in us is awakened and becomes an insatiable beast. Number 11, consuming some alcohol before or during a meal encourages increased calorie consumption from food. Number 12, don't buy and eat food while sitting in your car at a drive-through window. It's a wasted opportunity to neutralize some of the calories. Park a distance away. Number 13, take the salt shaker off the table. Most vegetables have salt in them naturally, and if you eat them fresh, that's all you need. Rule number 5, move your hind to save your mind. When you undertake physical activity, let's say aerobic activity such as climbing stairs or bicycle or walking fast, the muscles being worked demand more blood. In order for the arteries to supply this extra blood, they have to relax, open up as it were. And during the physical exertion itself, your heart is pumping and your blood pressure will go up to supply blood to all your working organs, such as the muscles you are moving and your heart that is now beating faster. The payback occurs after the physical exertion. Your resting blood pressure will go down because your blood vessels have relaxed, and your resting pulse will slow because your heart is in better shape. Physical activity promotes the formation of BDNF. Dr. Joshua Yarrow and his colleagues looked at the effect of training on circulating levels of BDNF. 20 healthy, untrained college-age males underwent a 5-week traditional or enhanced progressive resistance training. Following a bout of resistance exercise, BDNF levels in the blood increased by 32%. The authors concluded that resistance exercise induced a robust yet transient elevation of circulating BDNF, and progressive resistance training augmented this response. So what, you may ask? Well, what's the role of BDNF? What does it do for us? BDNF promotes brain repair and elevates our mood. Barbara Hempstead, a professor of medicine, and colleagues recently reviewed all the actions of BDNF. BDNF promotes tissue regeneration and opposes the action of inflammation, thus protecting and keeping healthy the lining of the arterioles feeding our brain cells. Importantly, not only does BDNF activity seem to protect our memory functions, but it also affects mental health in many positive ways. BDNF seems to counteract anxiety and depression. A. Garza and his colleagues showed that both exercise and antidepressant medication enhance the production of BDNF in the hippocampus, the structure so essential for good memory function. And this was true regardless of age. I recommend that you do 20 minutes of modest physical activity every day. Your brain will reward you by improving your memory ability and your other cognitive functions. And the hope is that you will make a commitment right now to moving your butt for 20 minutes every day, sufficiently vigorously to get slightly short of breath during the activity. I predict you will enjoy being active so much that you will want to make it a part of who you are, not a drudgery you impose on yourself. For the most robust brain health, you should incorporate both aerobic and resistance training, since each type targets different aspects of cognitive health, and there is evidence that doing both types of exercise in the same session increases muscle strength and the molecules that are generated from each variety of activity. Importantly, exercise does not just slow down the decline in brain function. It can actually improve brain function. It is never too late to increase your physical activity. You can make up your mind that you will maximize the daily opportunities to be physically active. Test a variety of physical activities to see which ones you enjoy more, and integrate them into your day rather than setting aside time to do exercises. Here are some suggestions. Number 1, avoid all escalators. Number 2, take the stairs rather than elevators in both directions for anything less than 5 floors. Number 3, park far away from the entrance of the shopping center and walk fast, or better still, jog to the entrance. Number 4, going for a cup of coffee or to your work cafeteria for lunch? How about jogging slowly, enough to get out of breath? Number 5, if you're an office worker, consider working out while you work by using a treadmill desk or a bicycle desk. Number 6, whenever the phone rings, stand up, then pick up the phone. Better yet, consider getting a desk that allows you to do your work standing up. Number 7, when you are brushing your teeth, flossing, or shaving your face, combing your hair, or taking a shower, get in the habit of doing some squats. Bend your knees as if you were going to sit down and maintain that position until you get tired. Number 8, walk. Walking is a wonderful way to stay fit, but, as mentioned, for maximum benefit, it must be vigorous enough to get you slightly winded. Number 9, Dr. Mike Evans, whom I mentioned earlier, gave his best annual advice to readers of the Globe and Mail in January 2014. He said, there's a super expensive new drug coming out. It reduces heart disease by 60%, cancer by 27%, Alzheimer's by 50%, and arthritis by 47%. It is now our best treatment for fatigue and low back pain. It cuts anxiety and depression by 48%, and people even lose weight on the stuff. Okay, it's not a pill. It's walking. Rule 6. Sleep enough if you want to think with ease. Life can get in the way of a good night's sleep. The demands of work and home can combine to impair our ability to get the amount of sleep we need. In nearly any city, rush hour can start at 5 a.m. and end at 9 p.m. Insufficient sleep has become so common that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are calling the current situation a public health epidemic. We all have known individuals who brag that they need little sleep to function well. Forget it. Most common mortals like you and me need a full night's sleep. Besides, people who cheat themselves of good sleep do not function well and are not thinking or performing cognitively at their full capacity. The brain is your most active organ and requires and consumes energy per unit weight that is multiples of any other organ in the body. Sleep is the opportunity for the brain to undergo a daily complete tune-up. It allows the brain the opportunity and time to wash away the exhaust material, the toxins that built up during the day's mental activities. And during sleep, brain repair is turned on, and the production of myelin is revved up. That is the white matter in the brain that facilitates rapid internal communication, so essential for normal cognitive functions. So sleep contributes to restoring brain function. When you go with less sleep than you need, in addition to feeling fatigue and being slow, every system in your body is negatively affected, particularly if sleep deprivation is prolonged. In chronic sleep deprivation, blood pressure goes up and stays up. Hardening of the arteries is accelerated, and the risk of cardiovascular disease like heart attack and stroke is higher. Falling asleep and staying asleep. Number 1. Tell yourself you don't have to watch the late-night news or that late-night TV show. It takes discipline, but if you must get up at 7 a.m., be in bed by 10:30 p.m. Arrange your bedtime so that you go to bed 8.5 hours before you have to get up. Number 2, teenagers need more sleep than adults do. Their internal clock is delayed compared to adults. Some jurisdictions have recognized this fact, so school start times have been shifted to later, and this has resulted in substantial benefits, including reduced absenteeism, less aggressive behavior, and improved academic performance. Number 3, total darkness and quiet are required to fall asleep and stay asleep. Put up those light-blocking shades, and when you are ready for bed, turn off all electronic equipment and screens in the room. Number 4, if you sleep next to someone who snores, it's time for one of you to move to a different bedroom and for the snorer to consult a family doctor about the possibility of sleep apnea. Number 5, you love your pets and think of them as family members, but please leave all pets out of your bedroom and certainly out of your bed. You can shower them with love in the morning and before you go to bed. Their presence in your bedroom will disrupt your sleep. Number 6, no naps during the day. Nodding off at your desk will deprive you of a good night's sleep. Number 7, you may feel cold when you get into bed, but if you use heavy covers to get warm, you might wake up during the night because you're too warm and sweaty, so keep the room cool. Number 8, a modest amount of exercise before you go to bed, going up and down the stairs in your house 2 or 3 times, helps avoid restless leg syndrome, which can interfere with sleep. But if you exercise too much just before turning in, your body may be too wound up to relax and let you sleep. Try to find your happy medium. Number 9, develop a bedtime ritual, a sequence of activities you do just before you get into bed. Your brain will get ready to fall asleep when you follow the same routine every night. 10. Once in bed, some people use a progressive muscle relaxation routine, starting with getting one foot totally relaxed by finding a happy position for it, then go to the other foot and get it totally relaxed, then one knee, then another, then one leg. You must also remember to include your shoulder and neck muscles in that relaxation ritual. Number 11, no coffee after 4 p.m. If you are nursing a cold or treating an infection, remember that caffeine and other stimulating ingredients can be found in over-the-counter medications, so pay attention to what you're ingesting. Number 12, avoid the temptation to take sleeping pills to help you with your insomnia. They're not only habit-forming, but have also been shown to impair memory function and are associated with a reduction in cognitive functions. Number 13, if you're having a late supper, avoid a large meal and do not consume too much alcohol. Number 14, if you fall asleep when you put your feet up to watch the late news, get up and go to bed. Rule 7, socialize and feel useful. Loneliness and depression can make you crazy. The statistics about loneliness in society are really disturbing. They suggest that many of us suffer from feeling lonely. In the United States, if you feel alone, you're in good company. In 2012, 27% of American households contained only one person. And it has been estimated that 40% of Americans feel lonely. A survey by Statistics Canada in 2012 reported that 20% of older people in Canada declare feeling lonely. And it gets worse for our youth. Over a period of 12 months, 2/3 of university students reported feeling very lonely. In Vancouver, a survey conducted by a charity found that 1/3 of all 25 to 34-year-olds were more alone than they liked. And these statistics are essentially double what they were 30 years ago. If emotional closeness is one key to our cognitive health, what is interfering with our ability to form these emotional bonds? Number 1, economics. Most of us are concerned with maximizing our own well-being, often forcing us to decrease our concern for others. To achieve economic success, we put up with a lot of dislocation, fighting rush hour traffic, leaving home a lot, cheating ourselves out of sufficient sleep, all of which lead us to limit the time we could devote to others. Number 2, devalued loyalty. We are in a society where loyalty is less and less a driver of our actions. No matter how long you have been in a relationship, a breakup is always a possibility and unfortunately can occur all too easily. Loyalty, be it to a life partner or an employer, is of diminished importance and value in current thinking, and relationships increasingly are victims of our self-absorbed society. Number 3, the fractured family. In my clinical experience, it's become too easy for a parent to tell their partner they're leaving the established partnership. In these breakups, no matter how amicable they are, the children remain marked for the rest of their lives. Essentially, they forever harbor the feeling that if they had been important enough, the couple would have stayed together. They lose confidence in the safety of their emotional and even physical environments and prepare themselves for unforeseen and unpredictable emotional hits. They often become hypervigilant, which may translate into an anxiety syndrome and depression. Frequently, these children become self-centered and recreate in later relationships the emotionally unpredictable environment they experienced earlier. Number 4, city dwelling, and specifically condo dwelling. 40% of high-rise dwellers feel lonely, compared to 22% of those living in detached homes, because the sense of community and neighborliness is much reduced in the condo setting. Number 5, digital connectivity. A major factor that distinguishes everyone's life from previous generations is the pervasive presence of electronic devices. While these devices are undoubtedly very useful, they do have an impact in various ways. First, because using most electronic devices usually demands that we stand still or sit. The excessive sedentary existence that is imposed on us by these devices has consequences. As well, sedentary behavior in children has been associated with slower brain development and lower feelings of self-worth and self-esteem. We have to admit that we have the world that we have, We can wish it were different, but it is now structured to increase our sense of being alone. If individually and collectively we do not do something to regain our emotionally meaningful social networks, there are consequences that are already evident, and there's more to come. How to avoid social isolation. People have gone to great lengths to avoid loneliness. Here are some examples. Number 1, postponing retirement. I will grant you that having a job does not guarantee a sense of usefulness. A recent UK study reported a correlation between being bored at work and the development of cardiac risk factors. So when we say someone is bored to death, it may not be too far-fetched. In a successful work environment, we feel connected to those we work with. This may well be why so many of us are reluctant to retire. Number 2, this is not an exhortation to work till death. It is only to emphasize that you should not go from an active, structured, and intellectually and socially rewarding life at work to a social and intellectual vacuum after retirement. Make sure before you retire that you have a clear plan of how, post-retirement, you will find opportunities to validate your existence in the world and your value to society. You can find positive, fulfilling work between the end of your career and full retirement. Number 3, volunteering. A recent paper in Psychological Bulletin reviewed all the evidence on the benefits of volunteering. It confirmed that volunteering reduced symptoms of depression, improved overall health, and conferred longevity. Number 4, seeking fleeting contact. If social activities are not pursued, some individuals report going for body massages just to feel human contact. Number 5, adopting a pet. I believe the explosion in the number of pets we have in Western societies coincides with urbanization and its consequent aggravation of our sense of loneliness. In Canada, the total human population is less than 40 million, but we own 26 million pets. 38% of households have a cat, and 35% have a dog. And here's the best statistic. 80% of individuals who have a pet consider them to be family. Pets decrease our sense of being alone in the world. So even though our cities are spread out with no central meeting places or green spaces, and our closest loved ones may be an airplane ride away, many of us have got pets. Just so some living creature is happy to see us when we show up, predictably and reliably, and makes us feel happier and less alone. How to avoid depression. Activities you can pursue that may lessen your lonely feelings and lighten your depression. Number 1, bring music into your life. Listen to music you enjoy. Music activates many parts of our brain and mind. Many have written extensively about this, but especially my colleague Robert Zator, who has studied how musical perception leads to pleasure. If the music you listen to gives you pleasure, it is cognitively useful to your brain. Number 2, better still, put on some music and move your butt to it. Get up and step to the music. Go dancing if you can. I have always thought that dancing should be part of our post-retirement activities. It combines listening to music with moving your body to a rhythm and provides social interaction. 3, join a choir if you can. Being in a choir is like having group music therapy, with the added benefit of the social connections that form among choir members and the sense that you are giving pleasure to others, all in one shot. It alleviates depression and enhances thinking ability and memory functions. Summary. Dementia is not inevitable as we get older. While it is ideal to start in our youth to enhance our brain's cognitive capacity, it's never too late. There are positive influences on our brain's thinking and memory functions we need to bring about. That is the essence of rule number 1 in this book. Use memory exercises, vary them, and keep your mind active. We also need to avoid a number of negative influences. Above all, we must avoid impairing our brain with vascular disease. And this means avoiding damaging our brain with strokes, both the kind we feel, which are treatable if attended to quickly, and the covert ones we may not feel. Both are damaging to our cognitive ability. Rule number 2. As the major vascular risk that can lead to strokes and harm our brain is high blood pressure, it is imperative that we measure and record our blood pressure, aiming for 120/80. Rule 3, a major and prevalent dementia risk factor is obesity, which in addition to being a pro-inflammatory state, raises blood pressure and in its own right impairs cognition in the long run. Thus, we need to eat right and weigh light in order to stay bright. Rule 4, the book provides solid advice on how to achieve this. We have also learned recently that moderate exercise enhances our memory functions, and so advice is given on the kind and amount of exercises needed to keep our minds sharp. Rule 5. The brain weighs only 2% of our body weight, but consumes 20% of its entire energy output. Sleep is used by the body to clear the brain of the exhaust material accumulated by this revved-up engine, hence the need to sleep adequately. Rule 6. And we've examined how to enhance sleep, duration, and quality. Finally, the book strongly recommends keeping a bright spirit and avoiding sadness, loneliness, and depression, as these conditions encourage vascular disease, lead to strokes, and impair memory. Epilogue. A message to all citizens, especially parents, caregivers, healthcare providers, educators, and governments. I hope this book has convinced you that you can do a lot yourself, not only to preserve, but even enhance your ability to think, your memory functions, your judgment, and your happiness quotient.